I'm your host, Jane Hogan, the Wellness Engineer. And in this session, we're going to be talking about evidence based pain management, how to manage pain effectively. And we've got an expert here who's all into the science about dealing with pain and helping you, of course, put pain behind you. Welcome, Dr. Joe Tatta.
Hi, Jane. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here with you.
I'm thrilled to have you here because, well, I love the science, right? I got that engineering background, and anything that's evidence based is always, I think people, it's a language that people are used to talking, right? And people trust it when it's science and evidence based. So you run the Integrative Pain Science Institute. So pain and science, you're putting it all together. I love that. We are in good hands with you, Joe. So with your Integrated Pain Science Institute, of course, you see people in pain. That's what you do all the time. When people come to you in pain, where do you even start?
It's always the best question, right? Because people are looking for answers. And
Yes.
it's funny. I just had a
Now.
conversation. Yeah, now, and I just had a conversation with a woman online a little while ago, and we were having this chat back and forth. And I said, "How long have you been looking for a solution to this?" And she said, "About 5 years." And
Mm.
I said, "How much money have you spent on this?" And she said, "Honestly, I wouldn't tell too many people this. I trust you, but I've spent almost $90,000 on finding a solution slash cure for my pain, which she's now found." But the question when people have pain, so of course, kind of starting at the top of the pyramid, so to speak, there's a difference between acute pain and chronic pain, or what you might call recent pain
Mhm.
and long term pain. So, acute pain or recent pain is what happens when you have a physical injury
Yep.
or you have a disease process that just starts for the first time.
Mm.
And with that, we're looking at really what we're looking at is damage in the body's tissues. So, damage to your joint tissue, damage to your ligaments, your muscles, your tendons, things like that. Over time, if that isn't treated effectively, if that isn't managed properly over time, what happens is the nervous system comes into play. And it comes into play as a very, very strong component in your pain. So not only do you potentially have some damage going on in your joints, but you also have this nervous system, which is constantly contributing to, is gathering your awareness, all of your attention around this experience or this sensation that you identify as pain. Now, let's say I don't know, let's say you went out to the gym and you bent over to pick up some weights and you strained your back, right? So maybe you tore some muscles or ligaments in your back. We know that tissue actually heals within about 3 months.
Mm.
If your pain continues beyond that 3 month period of time, so beyond the tissue healing time, if your pain continues beyond that 3 months, which is long term pain, we know that the nervous system really is the place that we have to focus on. It's not the only focus, but it's the place we have to focus on when it comes to the recovery and the rehabilitation of pain. So, where do we start? We start by educating people that there's a difference between acute pain and there's a difference between chronic pain. And then it's okay, now that you've learned a little bit about pain, how do we start to change your perception as to what the cause of it is? Because if people believe that their joints are persistently damaged, then they stay only with what are called biomedical or biomechanical treatments that just treat, let's say, the joint, when in fact, the brain and the spinal cord, i.e., your nervous system, may actually be what's causing the pain. So, kind of a long introduction, but it's probably the most important part of the beginning of treatment, which really is patient education or what we call pain education. So, educating someone about what the cause of pain is, and then how it relates to their particular life and their particular experience, because pain is a very personal experience,
Mm.
and your entire learning history and in your entire present life context contributes to what you're feeling.
So interesting for people to hear that because, even if they've got chronic pain, the long-term pain, they're probably still thinking the pain is coming from wherever it physically is on your body. And what you're saying is that it's the nervous system. It's the nervous system that keeps sending the signal that the pain is there. So, all right, so you got to educate your patients on that it is the nervous system. So then, how do you go about telling that nervous system to calm down?
Well, there's lots of ways. So even though we focus on the nervous system, people hear that, they think, okay, I just need to do something that targets the nervous system. And they, again, are looking for kind of a single solution. So maybe I just need to meditate to calm my nervous system. Okay, there may be a component of that there, right? I need to sleep better because sleep is actually when your nervous system regenerates
Hmm.
and when your immune system actually clears the debris out of your brain and your spinal cord on a nightly basis, and it helps you regenerate, helps with plasticity or neuroplasticity. Um, Believe it or not, movement, even though I'm bringing someone's attention away from the joint, we know that healthy movement can be very relaxing and calming for the nervous system. Think about when you take a nice yoga class or a gentle yoga class, or you go in the pool, which feels warm and unweights your body and you can move your joints around.
Hmm.
Think about a Tai Chi or a Qigong class, or even manual therapy. There are so many different ways into the nervous system. So there's really not one way for us to really fix it. Usually, and this is why I love what you're doing, Jane, is the education piece is so important because it helps someone realize, okay, there's more going on here than just one thing. And what are the essential components that I think have contributed to my pain? Once you know those puzzle pieces, then you can start to put together your own treatment approach so that you can self-manage your pain and obviously live and engage in healthy and active life that you want.
I like the way you said the puzzle pieces and also that it's individual. So there's a little bit of experimentation then, I would imagine, for the individual to figure out what works for them. And I used to find this interesting when I was first in these rheumatoid arthritis support groups, and some people would say, "Oh, go get massage therapy," and then someone else would say,
Mhm.
"Oh, I can't stand it. I come out of there, I hurt so much." And that was two people with the same condition, and they felt differently about it. So where do you tell people to begin, like, experimenting? I mean, we know there's some components, as you said, with the getting better sleep and moving and all these other practices. How do they figure out what's best for them? Is it just
Yeah.
simply experimenting?
Well, I love this because that's kind of where we started, right? So someone reached out to me. I have pain. I've spent $90,000 and it's taken me 5 years, right?
Hmm.
Really what she is saying is I've tried all these things, right? I've gone through the trial and error process and it cost me $90,000. And I finally, I found relief, but I'm a little frustrated because one, it took 5 years,
Mm.
and two, it cost me so much money. So that's the travesty, right? So there are three places I point people. First, there has to be something that's brain based in your rehabilitation program.
Mm.
Next, there has to be something that's body based in your rehabilitation program.
Hmm.
And there should be something that is spiritually based in your rehabilitation program. And within those three, brain based, body based, and spiritually based, for the most part, they should be active therapies. So, active therapies means that you're actively engaged in the therapeutic process. So, an example of an active therapy is meditation.
Right.
Even though you're sitting down, even though your eyes closed, your awareness should be in tune, right? Where you're becoming aware and present with your current thoughts, your emotions, and your physical sensations. You're learning to approach them in a way that's non judgmental, with a little bit of curiosity and probably some compassion if you have chronic pain.
Mm.
But you don't evaluate them. You just kind of notice them, allow them to come and go and pass. Now, mindfulness in and of itself can seem like something that's really big for someone. So I can give you the quickest, most basic, easy mindfulness practice that I teach my patients. And it's basically this acronym, which is called STOP. So we
Stomp?
can all stop, STOP.
STOP. Okay, let's hear it.
Yeah, so we can just, it's a good place right now because even right now, we've covered a lot of information. So all of us, including me, we just need to stop, take one big deep breath, Then observe what's going on in your mind, observe what's going on in your body, and then proceed. So that took maybe all of, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds, right? To do that. Now, what's nice about it is you've given your brain as well as your body a momentary pause and just a little seed of relief. And when you do that throughout the day, if you sprinkle that throughout your day, you start to retrain your brain or retrain your nervous system. So that's the first kind of like something that we can do here today on obviously on this interview is that's a simple brain-based exercise to do, right? Um, what's interesting is the brain-based exercises have an impact on the body-based exercises, and the body-based exercises have an impact on the brain-based exercises. So a really simple body-based exercise that you can do is find a part of your body that's tense or tight.
Mm-hmm. Got
And on a scale of 1 to 10, with 0 being no tension or tightness and 10 being the most, I want you to find about a 5. So very moderate, right? Pretty gentle. And I want you to just gently move that body part in any way that feels comfortable to you. So if it's neck tension or tightness, it just might be rotating your neck left and right within your tolerance, basically.
Mm-hmm. Before you hit any pain.
So I look at it like this. With chronic pain, you don't want to avoid the pain necessarily, because it's not realistic to think that we're going to have this pain-free life, and at every moment, whenever we move, it's going to be pain-free, because all of us have some type of things, something in our body that we're working with, right? What I look at as I want you to kind of come to the edge. So the edge is this point where you kind of start to feel like an awareness of like some tension or tightness or pain there, but you don't kind of bump up against it. You just kind of gently nudge it a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
then you come out of it. So you
Mm-hmm.
kind of visit gentle touch to it, and then you come out of it, right? So the same way in that stop exercise where you curiously observe what's happening in your body, you can also observe what's happening as you're moving your neck. And
So
the same thing.
you've got awareness while you're doing it. You're thinking, you're noticing.
That's right. Now, everything we do with chronic pain, really what we're trying to do is leverage neuroplasticity. So the ability of the nervous system to regrow and regenerate. The way the nervous, it's so interesting, the way the nervous system does that is in really tiny little bits of information spread out multiple times throughout the day. So it's not that you need to go do an hour and a half yoga class. It might actually be that you need to just start moving that body part once every hour, just for about 30 seconds or so, in a way that feels comfortable to you, in a way that you start to become curious about what that sensation is there. So we went over brain-based method.
Mm-hmm.
We went over a body-based method.
Yeah.
Then there's a spiritual. I don't know how many people have talked about spiritual aspects on your summit, Jane. I know it's a factor, right?
Oh yeah, there's been a lot of people have talked about it actually. Not everybody though. So I love the way you're tying in the brain. It's like mind, body, spirit, right? You're pulling it all together here. Yeah, let's go with it.
So spiritual aspect is interesting. Of course, there's a component of this where people say, okay, how do I tap into my spirituality to heal this? The flip side of that coin is, God, what did I do to deserve this?
Mm,
Because so many people are confused about, why do I have this? I've had it for so long. I've tried so many things. I spent $90,000 and 5 years of my life. What's the meaning behind this in my life? And it's really difficult for people to just kind of sit for a minute, because they don't want to see that there's any meaning to pain. They just want the pain to go away.
yeah.
But
Sure.
we know that if we help people make meaning of the experience that they're going through, it actually provides somewhat of almost like a spiritual bypass for them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that spirituality will take your pain away 100%. Probably won't. We have good, there's good data out there that when people pray, or when they meditate, or they're involved in a spiritual practice, that does provide some relief.
Hmm.
Um, do we have enough to know that it's going to take it away 100%? Not yet, but we know it's an important component. And there's really two components of that. It's one, what is the meaning in this? Basically, what is the meaning in my life to this? And then how can spirituality, how can the lessons I've learned in my spiritual practice, no matter what your spiritual practice is, because they're all wonderful, how does that help inform my recovery process and what's happening here with moving forward in my life?
Mm, I can totally relate to all of those from my own journey too. And I think, and I don't know if this is something you talk about with your clients or your patients, Joe, but for me, when I flipped the pain around and said, it's happening for me, it's happening for me to learn something and to grow more. Now, I know that's like a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, but for me, it kind of changed everything and turned it into meaning. And well, I wouldn't be here now, right? Doing this if this hadn't happened to me. I'd still be doing my engineering job. So it really, but I feel like I've grown as a person because of it. And in the beginning, even before I could see all this, I felt at least I was a more compassionate person. Now I understood that every person walking with a cane was in pain, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think kind of seeing those things. So is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
It is. And you can look at it like this. When you have pain, there's a natural tendency to resist it.
Hmm. Yeah, who wants
You,
pain?
right? Who wants pain? No one. And that's completely normal. Like that's what that's what your entire body really was set up to do, is one, to look for safety, and to resist danger.
Yeah.
And that resistance is really built in to the pain experience. Paradoxically, what we know about pain is that actually when you open and turn toward it in a healthy way, it actually helps alleviate the pain. So, for example, the main message that our pharmaceutical and medical industry sends to people with pain is that pain is not normal. You shouldn't have it. And if you have it, there's something wrong with you.
Hmm.
And here's the fix for it, basically.
Hmm.
Conversely, the message that we're sending here, Jane, is that pain is a part of the human experience. We do have ideas and reasons for why pain begins, and we do have solutions to it.
Hmm.
Yet you're not broke. And in fact, you're whole and intact as a human being, whether you have pain or not. And in many ways, you might actually be more whole if you're working with your pain experience and looking for how this has an impact on positive growth in your life. Because if instead of, when pain comes, instead of you putting up kind of like this wall, this rubber wall, if you will, that rejects pain, right? That resists the pain, um, consider that a star is naked in its approach, basically, and it's beautiful. It's not cloaked with anything. It's not covered with anything. It's beautiful just the way it is. And I look at people with pain like that as well and try to help people understand that, yes, it's completely normal that this experience is unwanted. And I don't want you to have pain either. But the way through this is to start to tear down some of that resistance so that you can start to move through this. And when you move through it, something wonderful tends to happen on the other side.
Hmm. Interesting to frame it that way as it's just resistance, right? It's a resistance. And if we can, we never get past resistance by pushing up against it. It doesn't really work that way, right? We need to learn how to work with it. So yeah, I love that. I love your approach. That's really great. And I find it, I love that you're science based and you're talking about the body, mind, and spirit together, or
So we
brain.
could do a little exercise around resistance if you want.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
People can do this. This is really simple. You can do this either against a wall. So you can stand up against the wall, or you can really just do it right here, kind of at your desk.
Okay.
So what I'd like you to do, Jane, is take both your hands
Mhm.
and put them on the desk in front of you.
Okay.
So you're pushing down. So you're pushing the desk down into the floor, right?
Yep.
Now, obviously, as you're pushing the desk down into the floor is pushing back up against you. So there's resistance there, right? So
Equal
I
and
want you to,
opposite.
yeah, equal and opposite. I want you to push down pretty hard. And
Okay.
just notice what happens in your body as you push. What do you feel? What do you notice?
Well, I'm feeling all that all through my body.
What do you feel? Can you, like, let's think about your arms. What do you feel in your arms?
I'm feeling like pressure in my arms and tension in my arms.
Right. So you feel tension and pressure in your arms. Good. And you probably feel that in other parts of your body.
Yep.
Um, Push a little bit harder now. Now what do you feel?
It's in more moving up to my shoulders and my chest, my abdomen. My feet have
Right.
come off the floor.
Right. So it's spread and it's kind of knocked you off your center of gravity in some way,
Yeah.
right? Just like pain does. And if I kept you here and you kept pushing against the wall or against the desk, what do you think would happen to all your muscles?
I think everything would get tense.
Yeah, but what would happen over time if I really kept you there, let's say for like a whole day?
Oh, I'd be in pain.
Yeah, and you probably would be fatigued too, right?
Fatigued, yeah.
And pain and fatigue oftentimes go together. People oftentimes associate, especially people with fibromyalgia who had it for a long time, they realize there's a pain factor here, but there's also a fatigue factor. Now, the minute you stop resisting, tension goes away.
Mm-hmm.
The minute you stop resisting, there's less fatigue, which means you have more energy. So again, this resistance can be mindset resistance. I'm not going to have this pain. This pain's not going to beat me, so I'm going to resist it, right?
Mm.
It could be bodily resistance where you tighten up all around that sensation. And it could also be a spiritual resistance where there's a higher power out there, and I expect you, the higher power, to fix this. Where instead, really what we recommend to people is that you collaborate with that higher power to figure out, okay, what tools do I have in the spiritual realm that can help me through this instead of going to that higher power. So in essence, you're not giving your higher power away. You're asking for strength from that higher power and collaboration from that higher power. So that's kind of like a brain, body, spiritual approach to pain.
Mm. Love it. So good. Yeah. So how do your patients when you talk to them about this, do you get resistance from your patients? Like what don't you have like something to give me to make this go away now?
Sure, there's absolutely resistance in the beginning, or there's not resistance, I should say, but there's more curiosity and questions, right? Because it's all new. I've
Hmm.
never heard this before, or I've never heard it quite positioned like this.
Hmm.
Where do we start? Is oftentimes like, how do I start? Do I start praying? Do I start meditating? Do I start doing Tai Chi? Do I clean my diet? A lot of that really is personal, right? Let's take diet, for instance, right? I'm sure a lot of people have spoken to you about diet and inflammation and gut healing
Yep.
on this webinar, and all that's important, right? But yes, nutrition feeds your brain, so you're feeding your nervous system, right? Um, Healthy nutrition also feeds all parts of your body, so your joints, your muscles, all that decreases inflammation. But let's say also that you're the type of person who values nature and finds that they have a real spiritual connection with nature. If, let's say, you shift from a diet that's high in processed foods and maybe start to eat a little bit less red meat every week, and you're helping the environment, so to speak, and you're planting your own garden, you're cultivating food, not only are you helping yourself with your diet and nutrition, but there's a spiritual component that you have connected to that. So you bring that into kind of your circle of healing when it comes to chronic pain, because for you, nature and plants have a spiritual aspect to it. So
Mhm.
there's lots of different ways to start to weave this in with people. Ultimately, it's what do they value? What do they see as a step forward that's achievable for them? Because we know that when people choose the techniques or treatments that they want, they're actually more likely to benefit from them than
Mhm.
for us to say, hey, Jane, I think you absolutely have to be on a paleo diet.
Yeah.
And you have to stay adherent to this and you have to be on it for 3 months. And if you, you know, come off the diet inflammation is going to increase and your pain is going to come back. And again, not the best approach for people. I really invite people into a collaborative relationship where I say, okay, here are some options. Let's discuss the options. And then which one do you feel is most beneficial for you and your condition, and one that's easily achievable for you? Because we know if it's not achievable, people aren't going to do it.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like the coach approach, which I learned in my functional medicine health coach training. It's very much what the person can do and what they know is manageable for them, and what's it like you said, what's important for them. What for one person, planting a garden might be hugely important, and if another person is like hates gardening, that's not going to work for them. But for them, it might be spending time with family and friends, and that's really what's going to lift them up. So I love that you've got that personalized approach, and that the person is involved in their plan, their protocol for what they're going to do. Let's go into the three again: the brain and the brain, the body, and the spirit. Let's look at some more practices around there that you often integrate.
So, brain wise, there are lots of different types of cognitive behavioral approaches you can use. We talked about mindfulness earlier. There's so many different mindfulness techniques that you can use out there. With mindfulness, I just encourage people to realize that when you approach a mindfulness approach to pain is not one where you approach mindfulness as it's going to shut off your pain, although that may happen, but it's just one that um, tunes your awareness and your acceptance around the entire process of what's happening. There are different types of cognitive behavioral therapy. So traditional cognitive behavioral therapy is wonderful. Acceptance and commitment therapy is the one I lean on the most. It's another wonderful technique. Those are all really kind of brain-based techniques for really helping people with their thoughts, their feelings, and their emotions around pain.
Can you go in a little bit more to the acceptance and what
Commitment
was it?
therapy, sure.
Yes,
Um,
acceptance and commitment. Yeah.
yeah, so we call that ACT for short.
Okay.
ACT is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy. So it grew out of the tradition of cognitive behavioral therapies. Traditional cognitive behavioral therapy for chronic pain really focuses on changing someone's thoughts and emotions or changing someone's bodily sensations about pain. Um, so, for example, traditional cognitive behavioral therapy might use, let's say, a contract, relax exercise or a relaxation exercise to release pain and tension throughout your whole body.
Hmm.
Traditional cognitive behavioral therapy might help you gain an awareness around your thoughts and gently and compassionately challenge you around thoughts that might not be 100% true. Like someone may have the thought that um, because I have low back pain means I can't play golf. So traditional CBT or traditional pain education approaches might help someone realize that that's not 100% true. And there are ways to change that thought. And when we change that thought, it actually changes your emotions and changes your behavior.
Mhm.
They're wonderful. They work well for certain people. There's a whole nother group of people who don't respond very well to that approach. And ACT or acceptance and commitment therapy has been created. Instead of changing thoughts, emotions, and feelings along the mindfulness realm, we help build awareness and acceptance around painful thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations if it's in the service of your personal chosen values, something that's valuable to you in life, something that you deem personally meaningful and enriching to your life experience. So we don't expect people to accept pain just for the sake of accepting pain. We help them take what's called a willingness stance toward some discomfort in their life if it's in the service of moving their life forward toward the things that they want, basically. So that's the difference between, let's say, traditional CBT and ACT.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a slightly nuanced their approach. And I like that you've got like a menu of things that you can use with different people. So that was some brain based. What about body based?
I mean, any of the mindful based movement approaches, yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, are really my favorite for people with chronic pain. They may not be able to do it right away. So you may have to start, let's say, with a physical therapist, where you can start on some kind of therapeutic exercise program. But ultimately, moving towards some kind of mindfulness based movement is wonderful because it brings in those aspects that we just spoke about, but lays it over really an embodied approach.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the newest advances are starting to look at cognition. We used to think that cognition just lived in the brain, but we now know that cognition is actually embodied.
Yeah.
So when you think of fear, for example, let's say let's say you go back to the gym and you want to get back to an exercise you used to do, but you know that's the exercise that caused you pain. And you're looking at, let's say, the weight rack or the treadmill or the yoga class that you want to get back to, and you're scared, right? There's fear. Where does fear show up?
Usually in the gut
Yeah. So for some
for
people, it
me.
shows up. Yeah. So as you start to think about, oh no, is this exercise going to hurt me? Is this right for me? Am I strong enough? Should I do this? Should I avoid it? My doctor said to avoid this. My doctor said to never bend forward ever again. Fear shows up. Now, for some people, it shows up in their gut.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, it shows up in their heart space or the center of their chest. Other people, it's a lump in their throat or
Yeah.
tightness in their shoulders or clenched fists and sweaty palms or sweaty feet, or even the sense that I have to now use the bathroom, right?
Yep.
All that shows up with fear. So you see how a thought is being embodied.
Mm-hmm.
What a lot of the mind body or brain body based approaches do is they retrain interoception, which is all the awareness that we spoke about. So again, instead of resisting unpleasant sensations in your body, when we learn to drop some of that resistance and become curious about, okay, fear is showing up, and that fear is tightness in my throat or dry mouth or clenching my jaw and my fists.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to be curious about that and learning to let that go a little bit through different types of exercises can be extremely beneficial for people with pain. And a lot of people actually with pain um, are really more body centric. I mean, they have a focus on the body already. We just have to teach them how to approach their body in a way that they feel safe and in a way that's inviting for them. So they no longer feel like they're a foreigner in their own body. Really,
Mm-hmm.
we want people to feel at home in their body.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that. I teach yoga now as well, and that's sometimes a theme that I have is like my body is my home, and I'm
Yeah.
safe in there, and it is such an we can get such an awareness when we're doing these different practices of what is going on in here, and just really coming into the body instead of stuck in that story about the pain. Okay, so thank you. And next is the spiritual approaches. So, what kind of spiritual approaches do you use?
So spiritual is something that's very personalized because oftentimes a lot of us have been raised with a certain type of spiritual approach. So
Hmm.
you always want to touch base with someone and see if they currently have a spiritual practice. If someone's Catholic or Jewish or Muslim or whatever it is, then that's just simply a matter of pointing them in that direction
Hmm.
and asking them to spend more time or more consistent time with that practice. And oftentimes I'll ask them as they do that to bring something into me and teach me something about their spiritual practice
I love
and
that.
and potentially how it relates to their pain. And I've had some really wonderful, interesting things happen when people do that because I was raised predominantly Catholic. I'm not necessarily Catholic anymore, but that was my upbringing, and that's the belief system that, on some level, was inserted into me. Although, obviously as I become an adult, I've looked into many different types of spiritual practices. Buddhism is interesting because Buddhism includes a lot of mindfulness.
Hmm.
Um, and there are aspects of mindfulness in every contemplative and religious practice. Um, Even Catholicism, people say, oh, there's no mindfulness in Catholicism. I say, well, when you pray, for example, when you do the rosary and you say certain prayers over and over and over repetitively, that's very similar to a mantra.
Yep.
that you might study in Buddhism or in yoga. So there's many different types of spiritual practices. Ultimately, with a spiritual practice, it really should be about decreasing fear on some level, though.
Hmm.
So there's this idea that, especially with pain, people start to become isolated physically because they can't move. They start to become isolated emotionally because there's so many emotions present that people may avoid them, or they may avoid people because they're attuned to what's happening. So really finding a spiritual practice or touching base with some type of spiritual practice on a daily basis really is about fear and starting to let some of that fear go. And when you let the fear go, ultimately it helps alleviate some of your pain.
Love all that, Joe. This has been so interesting. Is there anything else we haven't covered yet that you really want to make sure is you're giving this message to the audience?
The thing we haven't really covered, which you mentioned in the beginning, is hope.
Ah, yes.
And hope is really the through line that exists in all of this, right? So as you're changing your diet, you're hoping that's going to somehow optimize your health, and it will.
Mhm.
As you're starting a meditation practice, and you realize, this isn't as easy as I thought it was to work with my thoughts and my feelings and my emotions. There's still hope there
Mhm.
because you're actively engaged in the process.
Mhm.
All the spiritual practices really have hope embedded in them as well, right? So the really the take home message is that as you start do anything today, change just one thing.
Mhm.
And when you take that step forward, just to change one small thing, that's a hopeful step. It doesn't matter. It could just be calling a friend up and say, "Hey, I heard this guy Joe talking on this webinar series, and I'm thinking about doing one of the things that he mentioned." Even that is a hopeful, progressive step forward to changing your life and then to changing your pain.
So beautifully said, Joe. I love that. One small step. And to tie back into what you said earlier, the people, the audience, you know what that next step is for you. You've heard something today that Joe has said or one of the other speakers, and you're like, yeah, I can do that. So you know what you can do next, and just take that step. So Joe, that's really fantastic. Where can people find you, find out more about the work that you're doing?
Super easy. People can go to my website. It's integrativepainscienceinstitute.com. Kind of long, but it's integrativepainscienceinstitute.com. I have tons of resources there for people with pain, as well as for professionals who want to learn more about how to treat pain. And I have a great podcast too called the Healing Pain Podcast. So you can
Hmm.
follow me every week on that. And that's available on all the podcast platforms, including iTunes and Stitcher.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being part of this summit and for bringing your perspective. And I love what you've tied together there for the audience. So, Dr. Joe, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Jane. And thank you for the work you're doing.
And to the audience, thank you for being here, for your attention, for showing up today and listening and learning from Dr. Joe and what he's shared with you and taking away this message of hope to take you on your path to becoming pain free.